Hi, Lee here. So we've now completed the guitar neck. Really happy how that's turned out. I love the flame maple on there, and I'm really hoping it's going to pop when I come around to oiling or dyeing it. So what I'm going to do now is move on to the body. The first part is relatively simple. I've got my wood here. So this is a piece of, I think it was called sapele, sort of similar to mahogany. Nice colour brown wood. Just need to cut this in half and glue it together. But just as a reminder of my flame maple top, I don't know if you can see it properly on the camera there, but yeah, it looks really good. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what I can do with this flame maple. I've never finished a flame maple guitar before, so this is my first attempt. It's always nice to try something new, but hopefully this is all going to go okay. So what I'm going to do for now is I've already drawn my centre line on this piece of sapele, I think it's called. I'm just going to rough cut it in half, and then just make sure the two edges are square to each other and just glue them together. I'll be leaving that overnight anyway, so once that's done, we'll get on with cutting it out. So that's easy enough. All I'm going to do now is just check what side looks the best for finishing, because obviously I want that on the back because the top's going to be covered with the flame maple. So I'll just have a look, make sure there's no defects, try and get the shape worked out and choose a side. If you remember, I'm actually going to try and use a sort of a single cut, but this is a Music Man sort of shape. So I'm going to roughly sort of copy the Music Man shape. I quite like the look of that, and hopefully that should look good. So let's get on now. I'll check the sides, put them together, and set the glue. So I've already checked these two edges. I've found the faces I like. So these two edges are going to be glued together. They're already really square. So this pre-planed timber that I ordered, it's much better. I mean, they've done a really good job. The machine has worked perfectly. I cannot see a single gap or wobble between them. So I'm already pleased with that. But just to be sure there's no odd little blemishes that stop it going together, I'm just going to drag the sandpaper just across it like that, just to make sure there's no little sort of blemishes or knots sticking up. But it all looks pretty good to me. I mean, that's so smooth already. That's good. So this can get messy, so I'm just going to try and put a piece of cardboard through the middle. So I've just put a bit of glue on. You don't need to do both surfaces, usually one's enough, but I'm just making sure, and I'm going light with the glue on each side. And then all I do is I just spread it out with an old offcut of wood, and it seems to work fine for me. So that looks pretty good to me. I just want to make sure there's a big enough gap, because I really don't want any glue sticking this wood onto my workbench. So that looks pretty good. Right, that looks pretty good to me. So all I need to do now is just leave that for the night. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll sort of level it off a bit. So that's glued together nicely. The next step is I'm just going to glue the top on. I was thinking about maybe putting some weight relief in this, but I don't think I'll bother because this body is actually smaller than a standard sort of Gibson size. It's quite a compact sized body, so I think it should be light enough. So I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm just going to glue the flame maple book match pieces I have on top of this. So all I've done is I've already sanded down over the glue line. Everything's smooth. The other thing I've done on here, so what's important obviously with the book match pieces is, number one, you obviously have to make sure they're lined up correctly. I've looked at this in the light and I've lined this up with my eye to get the flames to match perfectly, and I've drawn my own lines on there. But what's very important is these two edges have to meet perfectly. You don't want any gaps in it because otherwise you're just going to have to go through a process of filling the gaps and you might notice it, etc. So I want to glue these as close together as possible. Now, there's two things that I want to do to make sure I can get these two pieces tight to each other. The first one is, what you do is obviously you have to make these two sides square. So what you actually do is the two pieces, you get your plane, but you actually plane at a very slight angle with the two pieces together like that. What that means is they perfectly match each other when you unfold them. So I've actually done that now, and they fit together perfectly. So all I need to do now is get these glued on. I'm also going to do one at a time. So I'm going to do this one first, because then I can, once this is glued and stuck down correctly, I can use that as purchase when I push this one against the other side. So it just makes sure that it's nice and tight with each other and there's no line visible. So let's get started. Let's glue the first one on. So what I might do is I might actually clamp this ruler to the line, so then I know that this is perfectly straight. It doesn't matter too much, but yeah, let's do that. Let's just make sure that these two pieces of wood are perfectly level with each other. So I've just put some blocks underneath the clamps because I don't want to damage the flame maple top. So that's all stuck down nicely. Just making sure I cover all the edges of the rough body shape so everything's glued nicely for when I cut the shape out. But this looks good. We just have to leave this now and then I'll come back and do the second half. So this has had enough clamp time now. It's time to get the other piece on. I'm just going to run a razor blade down this edge to make sure there's no glue sticking up. So for this piece, slightly different, I'm going to use the big clamps to try and pull the two pieces together. So I'm hoping that will work and that will get it nice and tight. I hope the small clamps using the blocks will put enough pressure on to make sure that's glued firmly. So let's get this lined up and we get that glued together. So that looks pretty good. It feels level, everything's clamped down. Obviously I started with the two big clamps just to pull the pieces together and then clamp down. It all looks good. I think the gap is non-existent. I think it looks pretty good. I won't leave this too long, so I'm worried there's a bit of glue underneath this block. So I'll move that in a second, but I just wanted to make sure it was down. So that's it. It's nice and straight. they're pushed together nicely. I just need to leave that now for at least an hour or so, and then we can start again. Should be dry enough. Let's get the clamps off. What I'll probably do is just give it a quick sand over and draw the template on ready for cutting. This looks really good. It's stuck nice and firmly. Everything feels pretty level. I'm just going to run the sander over this so I can draw my own template on there so I don't make any mistakes. But also I just want to see this flame maple come out a bit more. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. So let's just get the sander running and give it a once over just to make it nice and clear, and hopefully you'll see it on the camera. Right, just gonna run a slightly rougher piece of sandpaper over the seam just to try and get rid of some of that glue. I think this is just a bit of 180 grit. I was using it for the frets, if you remember. Well, that looks great. I'm really looking forward to getting this polished properly. Looks really nice. So the next step now is I'll get my template and I'll just draw out the shape, and we'll go from there. As you can see, I've just stuck the template down in the corners with a bit of masking tape. I've got the centre line directly on the centre line of the two maple pieces. So let's just draw around this and get it on the bandsaw and cut it out. So I just remembered I had to check something because obviously I made the neck by hand, but this template is from the exact dimensions of a 25.5 inch scale length guitar. The way the curve on this heel joint happens, I wanted to make sure that my neck wasn't too wide and that I could still put the neck plate in there. So it looks like I'm going to be a little bit close to this edge. So my modification for this body, I'm just going to bring the line out a little bit further and a little bit higher before it curves back in, just to make sure I can get this in. But I've checked the neck against the template and it is virtually identical in size. So I did do a good job of cutting it. But I just want to leave myself a little bit of room just to be on the safe side. So what I'll do is I'll just bring this line on the bottom edge of this heel curve, and I'll just take it up a little bit higher before I curve it, just to make sure I can get the heel plate in. So let's do that now. So excellent, I hope you can see that okay. But I've just brought that heel joint out just a little bit more, just to make sure I've got enough room to get the screws in. So now that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Obviously I already know the template is designed around a 25.5 inch scale length guitar, which is what I did my guitar neck to, and it's a 22 fret as well. So I know that I can follow the template roughly, as long as I make my own measurements, but it's roughly correct. So that makes it a bit easier, but you just have to be cautious of these little extras, because anything hand built is never going to be as accurate as the CNC machines they use when they create the templates and the dimensions. So I'm happy with that. All I need to do now is get this roughly cut out and get the sander out, round it all off, and then we can start routing some pickup pockets. So let's do that now. So I'm just finishing this off with the band sander and the Dremel sander just to get into the edges. One day I might buy myself a spindle sander if I keep building guitars, because really that's the easiest way to get a nice smooth round edge. But I'll use this for now. So let's just crack on and get this sort of shaped and smoothed out. So I'm just finishing the last piece by hand just to get it all nice and smooth, but so far it's looking really good. So I'm happy with this. It's all stuck down properly. That's a nice thick top, so I can sort of do a faux binding with that, because I actually quite like a binding, but with a nice maple top, you might as well just use that as the faux binding if you can get it smooth enough. And that's fine by me, and hopefully I'll see a few of the lines of the flame coming through there as well. But I'll just finish off this now, and then we move on to, well, I'll probably end the video there actually. In the next video we'll start measuring up and start routing some holes out for the pickup cavities, the bridge, things like that. So let's just finish this off, and then I'll see you next video.